Hello. Hello, good morning, everyone, and welcome to another live session here at Adapt. My name is Anne, and our webinar for today is entitled You and Your Employer's Guide on How to Apply for LMIA. And our topics for today are we'll be discussing what is LMIA, how to apply for one, how LMIA impacts your work permit and PR applications, step by step guide on hiring a foreign worker, news and updates about LMIA, costs involved when applying, and how ADAPT can assist you with your application. But before we discuss all this, let me first share with you who ADAPT is and who our speaker for today is. So, ADAPT is an immigration consulting firm based out of St. Catharines, Ontario. We help navigate people through immigration process with confidence and peace of mind. So aside from helping individuals with their visit visa, super visa, study permits, spousal sponsorships, and other immigration applications, we also specialize in helping foreign workers and Canadian employers with their LMIA, work permits, PR applications, ensuring a seamless and efficient immigration process. Our mission is to provide personalized, reliable, and comprehensive solutions to meet unique needs both for both employers and employees. So, our speaker for today is Teresa Papachan. She is the founder and director of Adapt Immigration Inc. and Adapt Consultants. She is a regulated Canadian immigration consultant, who has 15 years of international education experience. She is an immigrant herself who has lived in India, Australia, and now in Canada. And she offers expert advice on immigration and international studies. All right. So,
Thank you, Anne. Hi. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Welcome, everyone, to today's live webinar. We're going to dive into what is LMIA, how to apply for one, and what are the various streams, and what is the process. This is for you and your employer if you're looking at, getting a work permit and applying for one. So let's get started. I'm going to quickly present my screen. Okay, so what is an LMIA and what are the types of LMIA? Now, we've all heard the word LMIA quite frequently. So what does it actually stand for? It's called Labor Market Impact Assessment. It is a crucial document in the Canadian immigration system for employers specifically who want to hire foreign workers. So the LMIA serves as a confirmation that the Canadian government has a genuine need for a foreign worker to fill a specific position because no other Canadian workers were available for that role. So this is the main reason why the LMIA is there. So what are the small key points that we need to keep in mind before you do the LMIA? So the LMIA employer requirement for the Canadian employees, it is usually to obtain one so that they can hire the foreign worker. The process helps ensure that hiring the foreign worker will not negatively impact the Canadian market, like we said before. The LMIA process also involves demonstrating that the job offer meets certain criteria. So it has to be competitive wages, it has to have appropriate working conditions, and it absolutely have to adhere to Canadian labor laws. So what about the work permit? Once an employer successfully gets an LMIA, the foreign worker can then apply for the work permit, which is usually specific to the job and employer mentioned in the LMIA. There are some exemptions with this, with certain types of jobs, and they're called LMIA exemptions. We're not going to go in through that. We're just going to talk about the general LMIA process for today. So there are a few things that the employer has to consider and keep in mind before they start the actual process. So the first one will be if they have proof of business legitimacy. So the employer needs to provide this through various documents, and they have to prove that the job offer is genuine and the business is genuine. Then comes the recruitment process. The employer will then facilitate the recruitment of the foreign workers. So there is a whole process that is involved, and it's time consuming, that the employer have to adhere to and do and show genuine efforts of recruitment to hire a Canadian worker. So the next one is education, training, and experience. The employer will be responsible for verifying that the foreign worker has all the necessary training, qualifications, and experience to perform the job. So this is something that the employer needs to keep in mind. And the most important one is the compliance. Yes, you've got the STC, you've got the LMIA. What do you need to do for the application to maintain records and inform ESTC of any changes and address any compliance issues. There are also processing fees and costs that are incurred during the recruitment process, during the LMIA application and work permit processing, which we will talk about, and all the other expenses that you would incur, such as employment contract, or also the most important one here, although it is in the other section, is if the company is unionized. So there we take necessary action to address that too. So there are many types of LMIs, but these are the main ones that I'd like to highlight today, because when we apply for an LMIA, these would determine what are the requirements and how long you'll get your work permit, etc. So each serve a different purpose, and the requirement is different depending on the job and the immigration program. So there is a high wage LMIA, low wage LMIA, and LMIA for PR. So for the high wage, it has to be above the provincial and territorial median wage. Employers must also submit a transition plan outlining how they can plan to reduce their reliance on foreign workers over time. And also, employers must also meet their advertisement and recruitment requirements as usual, like any other LMIAs. For the low wage LMIA, employers are restricted in the number of low wage positions that they can fill. And also, they have a 20% cap on these positions for specific work sites. And LMIA for PR, for positions where employer intends to support the foreign worker's application for PR. There is no need for transition plan for this, but they're commonly used in cases where job offer is required to support an express entry application. And of course, there are other LMIs like the seasonal workers, agricultural stream, and caregivers, for example. So, but we're just talking about a generic different types of LMI applications here. What is the impact on work permit and your PR application? Now, we've seen what LMIA is and what is the general requirements in terms of the employer's eyes, but how does it impact your work permit and your future PR goals? So LMIA is a critical factor in the work permit application process for foreign workers, because it is initiated by the employer, and it always has to be initiated by the employer, and they have to adhere to the compliance issues and all of the process required for the LMIA. So it has to be initiated by the employer. If the LMIA is positive or neutral, that is, if the result of the LMIA is positive or neutral, it means that they're hiring a foreign worker will have a positive or neutral impact on the Canadian labor market. So this allows the employer to hire the foreign worker. Once the employer receives a positive or a neutral LMIA, the foreign worker can then apply for the work permit. The LMIA approval letter must be included in the application. Without that, the work permit will not be approved. So it is imperative that the LMIA approval letter be included in the work permit. The work permit issued will typically be tied to the specific employer, so it will be a closed work permit, and which the LMIA is approved for. So you can't get the work permit or get the LMIA and work permit for one employer and then work for another one. So it will be very specific to that employer. This means that the foreign worker cannot change employers. And also, positive decisions issued for LMIA applications received from May 1st, 2024 are valid only for 6 months, which means that the work permit application must be submitted within that time frame. So as soon as you get the positive decision, you need to be in the position to apply for the work permit immediately. So you don't have to resubmit it if the LMIA expires. Um, an LMIA and the work permit will greatly enhance the foreign workers PR application. How? By providing additional CR scores, so validating job offers and facilitating Canadian work. So your Canadian work experience will be taken into consideration for your Express entry, and you can apply through the Canadian Express class, which we'll talk about in a little time. And you also demonstrating economic integration into Canada. So you are integrating into the community. So how does it specifically apply? How does the LMIA specifically apply for your PR application? So an LMIA supported job offer can add up to 200 points depending on the NOC category. So 200 points is for a job offer in a position at NOC 00, which is a senior management position. So usually this is not very common. So it has to be very, very at an executive level, and you have to prove that this is required and the position is required, and that's when you get 200 points. The most common one that we have will be the 50 points for skilled occupations, which is NOC O, A, and B. These points can significantly increase your CR score, and which in turn gives you high chances of receiving an invitation to apply in the Express entry draws. Express entry has few categories, so the federal skill and the CEC class. So working in Canada on an LMIA supported work permit allows foreign workers to gain valuable Canadian work experience that we spoke about. And this gives you, and if you have at least 1 year of work experience in Canada, it gives you eligibility to apply for the CEC class in the Express entry, like we just discussed. The provincial nomination. A lot of people overlook the provincial nomination and get tied down to the LMIA itself. But there are various programs within the provinces in the provincial nomination that you should look at, and that can potentially give you additional 600 points. So because some provinces use the Express entry to select candidates directly from the Express entry pool, an LMIA supported job offer can make a candidate more attractive, which means that they would pick them out of the pool. And that will lead to an additional 600 points. We can completely change your profile in the Express entry pool. There are also PNPs, the non-Express entry streams. There are also PNP streams where they prioritize candidates with a valid job offer, and it demonstrates a need for the worker in that province. So don't overlook the PNP, because this is also the LMI or just a job offer could potentially give you options within the PNP programs. So for an employer, what are the requirements to show that they actually need this LMI application? The first one and the important one is to show that there's enough proof of business genuinity, legitimacy. And how do you show that? Is through a valid municipal, provincial, territorial business license. Most businesses will have that. Your T4 summary of your the remuneration that is paid, and your PD7As, statement of account for current source deductions, or an attestation confirming that you're engaged in a legal business that provides a good or service in Canada where an employee could work, and a description of the main business activity. This can be combined or one. Usually we only provide one or two, and if an employer has already applied for an LMIA, this might not be required. The job offer must outline these things. This is very important. that they outline the job responsibilities, wages and benefits, the working conditions, the duration of the employment. The duration of the employment will also um, determine, the work permit will also determine which application of LMIA you're applying for. So, for example, if it is a low wage, you get a work permit for 2 years, and if it's a high wage, it's 3 years. So the duration of employment can reflect that. The sick leaves, vacation leaves, overtime, and for the low wage as well, you might have to show additional benefits like accommodation and transport and things like that. So that's why the type of LMIA is very, very important in order to um, accurately outline your job offer. And also, of course, the job offer must comply with the Canadian labor standards and reflect a fair compensation structure, which should be discussed at the beginning of any conversation regarding LMIA. The proof of recruitment efforts. This is a very important part of the LMIA. The proof of advertisement and information that shows where, when, and for how long the position was advertised. So, proof of efforts to interview Canadian applicants. So that's what we're trying to show. So we're showing that we've genuinely have efforts, do recruitment efforts that we try to find a Canadian applicant for the job, and because there was none, and that's the reason why the employer is trying to hire the temporary foreign worker. So there are other documents depending on the application type. So if it's a high wage, low wage, LMI is supported for PR. For these categories, there's different requirements. So for the transition plan, for the high wage application, this would describe how they would reduce the reliance on the foreign workers in the future, and evidence that show employer has invested in training, and training the workers is also important. And in case of no licenses, and attestation confirming that the business is in good financial standing, will be able to meet all financial obligations to any temporary foreign worker hired for the entire duration of the employment. Usually this is included for new businesses, and this will help show that the company will have is in good financial standing, or will have forecasted a good financial standing. What is the actual process overall? So this is an overview of the different phases of the LMIA and the work permit. So we have broken down this into three phases. The first one is the LMIA application preparation. So we register with the job bank, which is one of the key job portals that you need to register in. And during this phase, if there's a provincial certification, we would use that as well. Most of the time, it's usually just a LMIA closed work permit. And the recruitment efforts start. So while this process has started, and or even before that, we would talk about with your employer, or if you're the employer, we'll talk to you about the actual LMIA application process. So you understand how the whole application process goes through, and get enough information to make sure that you as an employer is an eligible, and the worker is will be able to meet the standards of the requirements that you are setting. So first step is to register and post a job of this advertisement in the job bank. And in some provinces, employers are required to register and obtain a certificate from the province, like Manitoba, for example. And the employer is required to prove the efforts to recruit the Canadian citizens, which we just spoke about. So during the part of this process, all the documents required are collected. even before the LMIA application is being processed, just to make sure that we meet the eligibility requirements. And the once the LMIA has been submitted, it'll be reviewed by STC, and additional requirements and interview may be requested during the stage. So most new employers and or any employer for that matter will be required to go through an interview with ESTC with Service Canada to make sure that you know exactly what you're doing, and you have tried everything in terms of recruitment to find a Canadian, and that you were unable to do that, and that's the reason why you are hiring a temporary foreign worker. So once the LMIA process ends with the decision and a positive LMIA, it confirms that the company may hire the foreign worker. So the employer must indicate in the LMIA confirmation letter the names of the foreign worker selected. So the foreign worker must apply for the Canadian work permit after that. So once the name has been given, then the foreign worker will then apply for the Canadian work permit, which is, without that, they would not be able to apply for. This is an overall process, and we split it into 3 stages, mainly because each stage is very important. This is a complex process, so each stage is very important uh, to be in the timeline and processing time and keep it within the processing time of the LMIA application. The LMIA ESTC application is more to do with the employer. So the employer initiates it. It's the employer that gives the recruitment efforts, the documents, and all of the most of the information on the LMIA application. But once the outcome is come, and once there's a positive or a neutral outcome, the foreign worker is then going to do the work permit application. So which means that they will be, apart from the LMIA, it's also it is still a TRV, and they still have to show ties back home, just like any TRV, and you have enough funds as well. There were a few updates that in this year, especially last week, about the LMIA applications. So let's look at the one that happened on March 21st. The LMIAs will be valid for 6 months only, which was a decrease from 12 months earlier. So there's a shorter duration to apply for your work permit. So within that time, you need to make sure that you apply. If not, you have to submit a new application. All employers identified in 2022 Workforce Solutions Roadmap will have a reduction from 30% to 20% of the total workforce that can come in through the temporary foreign worker program under the low wage stream. So there is an exception for construction and healthcare sectors in this, but it has come down to 20% of the workforce. Employers will need to explore every option before applying for an LMI, including recruiting asylum seekers with valid work permits. So the recruitment efforts are widened, and they need to look for more in terms of making sure that everybody has gotten a chance to apply for that position before hiring a temporary foreign worker. Due to the recent massive increase in the LMIA applications, there have been a new change because the processing time has gone for LMIA applications. The processing time has increased, and the government has now set new rules. So because they want to enforce there's consistency of 20% cap, including the dual intent substream for planning to apply for the PR. Employers utilizing the stream will be now required to follow more stringent guidelines. So you have to make sure that when you're applying for the dual intent substream, the dual intent means you're applying for a temporary resident work permit and the PR. there's going to be more requirements to meet. So we'll have to be very, very careful in that stream. Implementing stricter and more thorough oversight in high risk areas during the processing of the LMIAs while conducting inspections. So the employers are will be accounted for inspections. So and this has to be, especially in high risk areas, like restaurants and other areas, there will be more uh, inspections, and it will be pretty thorough. So considering increase, so one of the other things that they're doing is to consider increasing LMIA fees to support additional integrity measures and processing activities. So right now the application fees is $1,000, and they are considering to increase this. Exploring potential regulatory changes concerning employer eligibility, such as requiring a minimum number of years in business or assessing the employer's history of layoffs. So they're going to really assess the employer's number of years in the industry with proof, and also if there have been any layoffs in the past. Have they laid off any Canadians, or did they have to lay off Canadians in order to hire foreign workers? Because that will not look good in the LMIA application. So all of this will be considered more strict. They already consider this, but they will explore this more stringent rules. So one of the other things before we get into the cost of the whole thing is the employer here has to pay for your LMIA applications. So by no means you as a worker should be involved in the cost of anything here. So the application fee of $1,000 per worker has to be paid by the employer, and any other fees, including the processing of, so the professional fees they use for an RCIC or immigration lawyer, the employer needs to pay for it. There are other fees that the worker might incur, like the work permit application and the biometrics. The employee can pay these fees, and they are allowed to pay their work permit processing fees for professional fees for RCICs or immigration lawyers. But the actual LMI application with the application fees and any professional fees has to be borne by the employer. Now, how does Adapt come into all of this? How can we help you with the process? So we help both the employers and workers. First, with the employers by crafting job advertisements that meet the requirement of the recruitment efforts for the LMI application. We evaluate credentials. We provide support for documentation for the employer and the worker. This is quite extensive and a little bit complex in terms of how to show or meet these requirements, and we will help you go through that. And facilitating a stress-free LMI application, because we make sure that we are one step ahead in all the process. We also help with workers when they finish the work permit, to help them transition into the permanent resident application as well. So that is all for today in terms of my webinar and information. This is a very generic information for everyone to have an overview about the LMIA, because recently there's been so much talk of LMIAs and people coming in using this as an option. And the final note that I would like to say is, although this is a very good process, you do need to. It is a little bit time consuming, because LMIA applications are taking longer, and there's a lot of time, effort, and money involved in this process. So before you think of this process, I would suggest that you look at all other options. Sometimes there are other options that people overlook, and they go straight into the LMIA. So talk to a consultant, talk to an immigration consultant or a lawyer to make sure that you have completely exhausted all your other options, and you have a genuine, and as an employee, that you have a genuine need for a temporary foreign worker. So thank you for today. We're going to start with some questions. Um, so let's read the first question. Is it possible to apply for an LMI for a newly opened business? What are the requirements? So Jardine asks, so Jardine, this is not completely impossible. It's definitely possible with the right documents. So there would be additional documents such as a business plan, in addition to everything that I spoke about earlier. So you need to have a very solid business plan. You need to have a financial forecast, an attestation from your accountant. So there are additional documents required, but it is, yes, it is possible. But it's also case to case. Like, for example, there you could open a restaurant. And we have this case currently going with us. We have a restaurant that is trying to open. It's been open for a while now in a remote area, and they could not get Canadian workers. So in that instance, they're not even a few months old, probably six to 8 months old, and they do not have anyone working for them. And without having someone work for them, they need to probably close just when they opened. So in that, and they have tried to find a Canadian worker for a long time. So they also had proof as to how they tried to do this in terms of recruitment as well. So in that case, without a foreign worker, the restaurant would have to close, especially because of its location. In that case, this could be a good option. So it really depends on the nature of business. I'm an international student. I want to change my status to closed work permit holder. Will my work permit or future PR application be affected if I stop studying? This is a very it has to be a very it's a good question, because a lot of people are in your boat. But I think I'm going to answer this with another question. Are you willing to give up your PGWP in order to go into a closed work permit? So if you're an international student, came here to study, and you have the option of applying for a PGWP, does that mean that you're willing to give up all the studies that you have done, and give up the PGWP and gain local Canadian work experience and have the opportunity to uh, get that Canadian work experience with an employer, and increase your CRS score, and then apply for a work permit if the opportunity arises? So it's my advice would still be to complete your studies, but depending on your situation, we can have a chat as to why you really want to go on a closed work permit. Is it because you have an amazing opportunity with an employer, or is it because you just want to get on the work permit faster? So it depends. There's a lot more questions to answer for your question. So reach out to us, and we can help you answer this more effectively. My PGWP is expiring by September. What are my options to have a legal status to extend my stay here in Canada? Is it advisable to apply for a tourist visa as early as now? There are a lot of people in your position that we seem to get a lot of inquiries with this question. Just like I said earlier, make sure that you have exhausted all options. Have you looked at the CAC class? Have you looked at the provincial nomination? Have if you have, do you have a full-time work with your employer, a permanent position that can help you with the provincial nominations? So look at all the options. I don't see a reason why you are applying for a tourist visa. If you are, there's a lot of questions with the tourist visa, so maybe have a more detailed consultations with us, and then we can help you answer that. But yeah, I don't see a reason why you want to apply for a tourist visa unless you have absolutely no other option. I'm a PGWP holder working as a home support worker. Is it possible for my employer to apply for LMIA? Um, yes, yes, they can apply, and they have a specific home care LMIA work permits as well. And make sure that you have exhausted your PGWP time before you do the home support workers. In order you would get more Canadian work experience and gain points. Which LMIA is valid for 6 months? Does it provide work permit or not? The LMIA application is different to the work permit. So the LMIA application is valid for 6 months, and during this time, you need to apply for the work permit. So, and the LMIA validity is important because within the 6 months of time that the result is given to you, to your employer, you need to apply for the work permit within that time. So the work permit is different to the LMIA. Can you show us as the sample LMIA? I don't have that now, but if you look up, just Google, you will be able to find that. What if the business is just newly opened? What will be the alternative for PD7A? Well, there are a few options. You can get, the assessments, a letter from your accountant, and also the business plan. I think in this case is very, very important. So, and bank statements showing that there's like your accountant giving you a financial forecast with the business plan will help. Where can we access the job bank? Job bank is you can go into jobbank.ca and you'll be able to access that with your. So you need to create a user ID and password, and you need to put in your SIN information, and you'll be able to access that. What if you are already working with the employer for a year now? If you're already working with the employer for a year, that's great. Do you wish to change into another employer, or do you want to continue? What is the if you can clarify that question, I'll be happy to answer. Can we get 50 points based on the LMIA only without applying for work permit? So you do have the LMIA application, which means that you have given this process through the PR, through the validating your job offer, which means that you have a genuine job offer. So yeah, you can apply. But you do need the work permit, a closed work permit as well, as soon as you apply for the LMIA. What happens if I just got hired and they're still applying the LMIA in order to hire me? Am I allowed to work already, or how do the salary would be in cash or check? No, you cannot work without you having your work permit. You absolutely need your work permit to start working. So doesn't matter if it's cash or check, you do need your valid work permit. Do you have employers? No, I don't have employers. That I do not give out LMIAs. Unfortunately, this is a very normal question, but we do not have employers. We assist employers in helping them hire their foreign workers, but we don't work with them specifically for this. How long is it now, the LMIA process? Now, this is a good question because used to be for different streams, it used to be different. So for the high wage, low wage, it used to be different, but now it used to be a month or two, but now I think it's going up to 4 to 5 months. But at the same time, we've heard that in Manitoba, they're getting LMIs within 3 weeks. So it really depends on what stream you have applied for. and also if your employer is a recognized employer, because they would get faster processing. Is there a minimum number of existing employees required to apply for high wage LMI? Currently, the owner is managing everything, and I have revenue. Um, so existing employees required to. So yeah, they. I think you'd still need to have. From what I'm getting at, I think there is what your meaning is, that is they still need like at least 10 employees in order to apply for the high wage. Currently, the owner is managing everything and have revenue for 500. Really depends on the employer. So Gurvinder, reach out to us with a little bit more clarity on that, and I can help you. Can I apply for Canadian Experience class 1 month before my permit expires? I think that's a big risk, because once you got the invitation, the time that you put the application into the express entry pool, and from the time you get the invitation, is a time that you cannot you cannot gauge that at all. So when you put the application in, you just express your interest. So that doesn't mean that you go on an implied status. So only once you get the actual invitation and you apply, you then go, then you can stay. So it really depends on which stage you are in with the PR. Can my brother-in-law hire me as a home support worker? Well, it's another common question. Really, does he need you as the home support worker? Do you have experience in that? And these are the questions that the officer could ask. It is not uncommon for family to hire get an LMIA. I think there's even a case law for this, but it's about determining whether it is genuine. First, if the business is genuine, it is about whether there's an absolutely a need. It's not because you're the brother-in-law, but there's other tick marks that your brother-in-law needs to go through before hiring you. Is it possible for an employer to hire a foreign worker even if their business is not large and is actually a small operation? This employer is genuinely in need of someone to assist them in construction. So this is a good question too. If the business is not large and you do, the main crux of this will completely depend on whether or not they're able to pay the employer. So it doesn't really matter if it's small, large. It's about whether they have enough business revenue. How long have they been in business? Can they demonstrate that they can pay, they can afford the foreign nationals' salary and wages? So these are the things that you'll have to keep in mind before they get the LMIA. Within 6 months of LMIA validity, and when we apply for the work permit, how long would it be the processing time? For the work permit right now is a little bit faster than the LMIA processing. LMIA applications are taking a little bit longer, but the actual work permit takes a couple of weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, depending on where you're applying from. If you're under LMIA with closed work permit, can you apply for other jobs, or the existing employer need to cancel the work permit? Yeah, you cannot apply for another job. You're on a closed work permit, and this is employer specific. So unless you are looking at applying for other jobs in order to move into another job, you can, because nothing's going to stop you from looking at other job offers. You just cannot work for another employer while you're with the current one. But let's just say we actually have a case right now where an employer sorry, a foreign worker is working for an employer and they're not very happy with that employer because of the wages, and they want and the duties have increased. So they applied for another worker, for another employer. They got the job, and that employer was willing to hire them on the LMIA basis as well. So while the processing was going through, they are still working for the initial employer. It is very important to know during this time that you are still on the employer specific work permit. So once you leave the job, you don't have that work permit technically. So it's important that you get the other job and the LMI and the work permit in order for you to switch, and then we redo your work permit with the new LMI application. Can a 1-year-old business with 80,000 in revenue apply for it? So again, this even if it's brand new, we need to demonstrate the need for the for a temporary foreign worker. So if there's an absolute need, do they have the revenue coming into, or the forecast coming in to pay the employer? Pay the temporary foreign worker, then you can. This is it's very all new businesses and applying for LMIs. They have to be they have to make sure that they have the ability to pay the temporary foreign worker. So there's no really set standard on what the revenue should be. It's more about the financial capacity. So what wage are you on? Are you able to pay those wages in the future? I will rephrase the question. Currently, there is only one employee in the company. There is the owner and no other employees. Can the owner apply for high wage LMIA to foreign worker? Well, Govinder, so yeah, they can, but if there's the only one owner, and they're getting 500 revenue, how is he doing the business by himself? So what industry is he in? And why couldn't he hire a Canadian? That's one. And the second thing is, it is always better if the business of that large scale, because after it's 500K, it's almost a medium scale industry, medium scale company. Why hasn't he already gotten people in the employment, and is he absolutely doing everything by himself? So yeah, there are a few questions that you need to ask before you take this on. How is the PR supporting LMIA different from high wage, low wage? Yeah, so the difference is the company has to be at least a year old for this, and the application is to support the temporary foreign workers PR application that's ongoing. What if a person who's currently working with the employer on LMIA closed work permit and the employer is shutting the business? What are the options for that person, employee? Yeah, this is a good question. If the person is currently working for the employer and they are closing the company, they do need to look for a new employment, unfortunately, and look at a new closed work permit, LMIA closed work permit. Is there a minimum revenue requirement for employee to apply? So, RSI, there technically is not, but you still need to demonstrate you have enough to generate a good amount of revenue in order to hire a foreign worker. So that would be at least a minimum $100,000 in order to financially sustain a full-time employee with a minimum wage and be able to sustain your business. So this is it's not really given anywhere, but it's just a cap on an idea to whether or not they can hire a foreign worker. Is it possible for a self-employed employer to hire a foreign worker, even if they do not possess the T2-200. This employer has been in business in 10 years and has a P. So surely, you can, the self-employed employer means that they own the business. Is that what you're saying? So any business that they do not possess a T2-200 and they've been in the business for 10 years and has a PD7A, they should be able to, depending on what company it is in, what industry it is, how many employers, or how many current employees that they have. So it's not really um, something different to being just an owner, a self-employed. The super visa application, does it need an the super visa application doesn't need an LMIA? Can my son apply a super visa to me even though he's not working yet? He just recently graduated and my other son is working as. Super visa is a temporary visa for parents and grandparents of PR and permanent Canadian citizens. It's got nothing to do with the LMIA, and it's for parents or grandparents of permanent residents and Canadian citizens. How does LMIA lead to any PR pathway in Ontario? So we just spoke about how all of the LMIAs and the work permits will give you points for your current express entry application or provincial non-express entry application. So it just adds points into your current PR profile. My PGWP will expire soon, and my question is, with a management position with my current company, am I qualified for open work permit? Should I focus on LMIA? If your PGWP expires, I don't see a reason why you would get an open work permit. Is it through any other streams? Do you mean if you have to focus on an LMIA? I'm not going to answer the specific questions related to your background because I would need more information. So it would not usually apply for other people as well. So definitely reach out to us. Okay, so it looks like that's about it. Thank you for staying with us for so long and listening to the LMIA webinar. And thank you for being so engaged. I hope I was able to give a little bit of clarity. If not, please reach out to us and give us more information, and we'll be able to help you. So how do you do that? You can either book a consultation, because everyone here will receive an email soon to book a consultation, and that will be for free. And if you have any questions, you can send us a message, and like always, just like and follow us in all social medias. Thank you very much. Happy Friday, and hope you all have a great weekend. And thanks again.